can definitely drop the cancer death rate by 50% in 5 to 10 years. These people that are given terminal diagnoses is just nonsense. There's a lot of what we call cancer survivors. We have millions of cancer, so-called cancer survivors, but their bodies pay a real big price for that. They become candidates for all kinds of other ailments, neuropsychiatric problems, digestive problems, hormonal problems, rapid aging problems. I mean, all kinds of problems. So in the so-called cancer survivor, and that's the great tragedy that so many people around the world are being brutalized by a system that fails to recognize the central biological problem of the disease, which is the fermentation mechanism. And our drug diet cocktails are designed to target the fermentation while enhancing the health and vitality of the normal cells in the body. Now we know what the weaknesses of a tumor cell is. They can't live without glucose and glutamine.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's very special interview with Dr. Thomas Seyfried. Dr. Seyfried, it is an honor. Thank you so much for accepting my invite.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Seyfried, I do have your full in-length bio in the description box, but I was wondering if you can share with our audience, what is it that you've been doing recently? What have you been focusing on the most recently?
Well, most recently, we've got probably two or three main projects. One project is to develop diet drug cocktails that can manage cancer effectively without toxicity. So we use preclinical model systems, and the information we get from these preclinical systems is then shared with physicians in the clinic, and they start applying these drug diet cocktails to their cancer patients. But the more important issue, the main issue, is to show that cancer is predominantly a mitochondrial metabolic disease and not a genetic disease, and to test Otto Warburg's central theory that cancer is in fact a mitochondrial metabolic disease. And we are collecting more and more data to show that Otto Warburg was essentially correct. And we're explaining why everybody got so confused and went off track on this cancer thing when we should be effectively managing this disease quite easily. And we're not doing that. And that's the great tragedy that so many people around the world are being brutalized by a system that fails to recognize the central biological problem of the disease, which is the fermentation mechanism. And our drug diet cocktails are designed to target the fermentation while enhancing the health and vitality of the normal cells in the body. So we have two main projects. One is more practical, how we translate our stuff from the bench to the bedside. And the other one is more fundamental in the foundational science that underlies cancer. So if you can shift the whole program away from the genes and the crazy stuff that they're doing in the clinics today, that's going to be the biggest challenge, because then it flips the whole field over to where it should be, not where it is right now.
Your line of research, which is completely different than the mainstream research on cancer, has led people to say that you should be nominated for a Nobel Prize for your work because it is so groundbreaking. Do you think that would ever happen?
It's hard to say. If it happens, that's great. But if it doesn't, the more important issue is how many people can be saved or allowed to live longer on the planet at a higher quality of life. I think that's the more important issue. And because if that's the case, then you were right. So, if these people that are given terminal diagnoses is just nonsense. How did they get to that state in the first place? I mean, after being brutalized by failing this and failing that, and then their bodies are so beat up, and they're just suffering so much, and that should have never happened in the first place. And so if you can stop that from happening, and we can definitely drop the cancer death rate by 50% in 5 to 10 years if people knew and accepted. The problem is that the field thinks that cancer is a genetic disease. So all of the major therapies in the clinics, like CAR T immunotherapies, the immunotherapies, the Keytruda, Opdivo, all that nonsense, that's all based on the gene theory of cancer. And if the gene theory of cancer is not right, then it explains why we're not making any major progress and why so many people are suffering immensely.
It's funny you said the CAR T cells because
chimeric T antigen receptor. It's a CAR T. It's called CAR T. It's a crazy way to, to try to get immune cell system to kill tumor cells. It's a very complicated, costly procedure.
I heard about it, and I was actually going to ask you about it, but I guess now I know what you think about the whole thing, because Tony Robbins wrote a book recently about regenerative medicine and stem cells, and he was talking with a lot of enthusiasm about how leukemia has been with CAR T stem cell. And I thought that was interesting because normally those kinds of cancers are really difficult to treat. And I wanted to ask you, but I guess there are better ways.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we're not going to say that. I mean, radiation can cure some people of cancer, right? I mean, you pay a big price for that. I mean, a poisoning with various kinds of cocktails of chemicals. There's a lot of what we call cancer survivors. We have millions of cancer, so-called cancer survivors, but their bodies pay a real big price for that. They become candidates for all kinds of other ailments, neuropsychiatric problems, digestive problems, hormonal problems, rapid aging problems. I mean, all kinds of problems. So in the so-called cancer survivor group, yes, CAR T can, but I've been contacted by a number of patients who have had CAR T therapy and their cancer is progressing. So clearly it doesn't work for everybody. And leukemias and blood cancers heavily dependent on glutamine for their growth. And in fact, that's the common connection, similarity between all of the major cancers. They can't live without glucose and glutamine. And there's no trial going anywhere, as far as I know, that's simultaneously trying to take away glucose and glutamine. So why are they not doing this? And the answers are many, but the biggest stumbling block, there's no business model for what we're doing. The science is solid, but the revenue generation is not. So and everybody knows this, but guess what? Nobody is willing to do anything about it. So the suffering continues.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
It is mind-blowing that I really haven't heard of any other researcher other than you for the last maybe 10 years that I've heard about your research. There's nobody else doing what you're doing, at least as far as I know. It's mind-blowing at this point, don't you think?
Well, I think there's a number of groups that are doing it. We have the clinic in Istanbul, and there's a couple of new small clinics that are opening up. No major hospital. Actually, they do part of it. Okay, like ketogenic metabolic therapy is being introduced in a number of clinical trials. Jethro Yu's group at Cedars-Sinai is getting really good results by putting their glioblastoma patients on ketogenic diets. The problem is they're not targeting glutamine, and they're not allowed to do that. And I told Jethro, I says, you really want the spectacular results, you got to target the two fuels simultaneously.
Why are they not allowed to target?
Because they have to do, well, they got to do radiation. The radiation frees up massive amounts of glutamine in the brain. So you can't, and the glutamine drugs, the ones that really, really work well are off patent. And they don't want to use drugs you're not going to make revenue on. So yeah, a lot of, and it's not just the physicians. The physicians, the guys that are treating the patients would also like to do this, but it's the hospital system and it's these other bureaucratic systems that are in place to prevent some of this from happening. Because the purpose of the hospital is revenue generation. How are you going to generate revenue if you're using therapies that aren't going to generate revenue? So the bottom line, it all comes back to a business model. The guy who should get the Nobel Prize is the one who figures out how to make a buck on what we're doing. You know,
they are getting the Nobel Prize.
A Nobel Prize for economics.
Right, exactly. Incredible. So, you know, I wanted to ask you something before we dive a little deeper into the cancer topic. Why did you choose to study cancer? Why specifically then you moved into researching low carb and cancer?
Well, we had worked in the field of epilepsy for decades. When I was at Yale University, our whole department was focused on epilepsy. And I wrote a grant, internal grant on ketogenic diets while I was on the faculty at Yale in the Department of Neurology, and they said, "Oh, nobody's interested in that." And it wasn't even for cancer; it was for epilepsy, where ketogenic diets have their biggest power is in managing refractory seizures. And they were all like, "No, drugs are the way to go. Nobody wants to go on a high-fat diet and all this kind of." So I dropped it. And then years later at Boston College, one of my students said, "Oh, Jim Abrams, the director of the movie director, who did, what were those movies that he did? Anyway, he had Meryl Streep do a movie on First Do No Harm. And then he had a whole bunch of other kinds of movies. But his son, Charlie, had epilepsy and found out that ketogenic diets could help Charlie, his son. So he then cultivated the field, Jim Abrams did, and got everybody excited about ketones. My student came back and say, "Oh, this guy, Jim Abrams, is all excited about ketogenic diets." And then, you know, we had been doing a lot of work on cancer, but it was in lipid biochemistry. It wasn't really in energy metabolism until we started to take our metabolic therapy for the epileptic mice and put it on the guys that had the tumors. And then we realized we started to see a connection. Why would a ketogenic diet be so powerful against the cancer, as well as managing epileptic seizures? And then we stumbled on Otto Warburg's central work. And Otto said, the cancer grows on the glucose. And we know that that glucose drives the seizures, the epileptic seizures as well. If you lower the glucose and transition to ketones, you stop seizures. And you can also stop the growth of the tumors. But the tumors do not generally disappear completely because the glutamine issue, we stumble upon that later on when we realize that, you know, now we know what the weaknesses of the tumor cell is. They can't live without glucose and glutamine. There's no other fuels that will drive them and keep them alive. So the strategy for managing becomes very clear.
What about lactate?
Lactic acid is a waste product, okay? So lactic acid, instead of being respired and generate energy by full oxidative phosphorylation, which is the way we get most of our energy in our body, it's being dumped out into the microenvironment, creating acidification, which then allows the tumor cells to grow more aggressively because they're throwing out lactic acid, but also makes many of the drugs to try to stop the tumor ineffective. So it blocks the immune system's ability to kill the tumor cells. So if you're saying, "Oh, all these checkpoint inhibitors, lactic acid is preventing them from," well, take away lactic acid. If you take away lactic acid, the tumor cell dies and you don't need the immune therapy. So, I mean, it all makes total sense if you understand the biology of the problem. But, you know, when you're tied up into these big, you know, corporate decisions, then it becomes hard to break through these walls.
Exactly, because you have to follow the money because that has so much power in.
Well, you know, you know, it's up to the patient. You know,
Yeah.
well, the poor patient is just in the middle right now, because, you know, they're going to the physicians at the top medical schools and they're saying, I want to do metabolic therapy, and they say, "Well, I'm sorry, we don't do that here." So if they go out into well, who's going to do that? And a lot of the physicians are not trained to do it. and fear they're going to lose their medical license if they try to treat somebody. So who is in the poor patient is just like a ping pong thrown from one place to the other. Patient knows what to do. They want to do metabolic therapy, but they can't do it because there's too few practitioners. There's no money in the procedure. So they're left in nowhere land, you know, and it's really a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Wow. Well, has anybody cured cancer using metabolic therapy, as opposed to, I know you don't like to say the word cure, and generally we say in remission.
Yeah.
Whichever term you would like to use.
Well, I think the better term is management. How can you effectively manage cancer? You know, if you're so fortunate to die from a heart disease at 95 years old and your tumor never came back, then I guess the remaining family could say, you know, that metabolic therapy is cancer. But who's going to know that? You know, right now, does any therapy cure cancer? So, I mean, when you ask about, you know, all these people that are long-term survivors, many of them, the cancer returns at some point in the future, or they die early from the treatment that they receive in an attempt to cure cancer.
Right.
So when you say, is cancer curable? You know, I don't know, but it's certainly manageable. And I think you can manage the disorder. Now, is it easy? No. Is it easier to sit down and be irradiated and poisoned? Yeah, it's a lot easier. You don't have to do anything. You just sit there and they infuse poison into your blood. And when I say poison, the drugs that we use to manage cancer are very poisonous drugs. I mean, you try them on the mice to kill the mice. I mean, it's poison, basically. You're trying to poison out the tumor cells. And as a result, your hair falls out. Why your hair falls out? I mean, you're trying to kill tumor cells, not go bald, right? I mean, if you knew what you were doing, the so-called precision medicine, right? Give me a break. You know, all these side effects from precision medicine. They use these nice fancy terms. When you use metabolic therapy, you target the tumor cells alone. You don't go bald, and the rest of the body start to get very healthy. So, and a lot of times we've seen that people with cancer, they have high blood pressure, they have other comorbidities, type 2 diabetes, they're sometimes of obesity, all these different things. Many of these things go away along with the cancer. Now, is that person of the cancer? We know that metabolic therapy can type 2 diabetes. You know, Jeff Volek's group has done that. They have the Verta Health program. They can cure type 2 diabetes with metabolic therapy. Can you cancer with metabolic therapy? Maybe. The possibility is there. We don't have enough people doing metabolic therapy like your age. Someone like you look extremely healthy. Okay, get a breast, God forbid you get a breast tumor. Then you go on metabolic therapy and you live to be 95 years old and you die from cardiovascular disease. You were obviously a breast cancer, but you know, you got to live a long time to know if you're. The issue is how long can you live on the planet in a fairly healthy state with a good quality of life? And I think that's the most important thing that you can do. So managing cancer with a good quality of life is the goal. And I think metabolic therapy is the way to do that. And it doesn't mean just diets and things like this. There are specific drugs that work synergistically with the nutritional aspect of the approach. And it's perfecting the drugs at the right dosage, timing, and scheduling with the nutritional background that allows the patient to recover and minimize the adverse effects of these growing tumor cells, if not, you know, putting them into a long-term state of remission. And this is very possible, and it's being done, and people are living longer doing this.
I'm going to ask you about specifically that, but first, how does metabolic therapy compare to traditional treatment in terms of quality of life and length of time spent without any recurrence?
Well, I can't answer that because we don't have enough data to support that. You know, some of the studies being now, you use historic controls, like for glioblastoma, which is a very deadly brain cancer. You know, that median survival is 15 months from the study. And we've lost, you know, President Biden's son, Beau Biden, passed away from glioblastoma, as did John McCain, the senator from Arizona, as did Ted Kennedy, the senator from Massachusetts. I mean, these are high-profile cases, and you know, they all expired within 2 years. Most, you know, the older people are less than 15 months. But you know, so historical controls. So if you have a metabolic therapy and your patients are living to say the median survival is 36 months, that's a huge advance. I mean, that's a monstrous advance. Most of the drug treatments that they're given for glioblastoma patients, you're lucky if you can get 1 or 2 months longer, maybe 17 or 18 months. So you know, and the problem, as we've said, is they will not stop doing this radiation of the brain. And radiation of the brain, as I said, the human brain should rarely, if ever, be irradiated, because you free up massive amounts of glucose and glutamine that drive the tumor. So why are you doing this when you don't have to do this? And the answer is revenue generation. So because the biology says you should never do that, and yet people do it because they've been trained to do it, and this is the standard practice in the medical schools, and yet they continue to do it and go through the institutional review boards, and anything that says you no longer need radiation, they cut it down. They don't want to do that. So you have to do standard of care, and then if the tumor recurs, which it always does, then you can do metabolic. Well, what are you doing that for? That's back ass work. You don't do stuff like that. But yet this is the standard of care for the country. Not only the United States, all over the world. You go to India, Germany, Japan, they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like unbelievable.
The institutional review boards of the universities at the end of the day are also part of universities, and they receive a lot of funding from different groups, right? So there's a lot of politics at play.
Oh yeah.
Whenever it's an institution, you know, it's very difficult for them to take these kinds of risks. You know, for me as a dietitian, also, when I talk about carnivore diets, I worked at the University of Miami, and they were asking me for advice on how to tailor a study for certain population groups. And I was talking all about, you know, keto, low carb, carnivore, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, it was like, yeah, no, we're just going to submit the grant about Mediterranean diets because that's the only way we're going to get funded.
Yeah, well, what people will do is do whatever they need to do to get funded.
And it's hard to get funded.
Yeah, well, it's hard to get funded on diet things in the first place. They want, you know, gene expression profiles and all this kind of crazy stuff. That really is all downstream epiphenomena anyway. You know, it's
how are you finding it to, like, how are you finding the resistance to be able to publish your research and everything you're doing?
Well, you know, we continue to publish in top journals, you know, good peer-reviewed journals. It's the science that, you know, it's the science, I think, that is the science accurate and right, and can you test your hypothesis? Do the data that you've collected from the study support the hypothesis that you have? You know, I don't start a research paper saying, you know, cancer is not reviews. I can do that in a review, but I don't do it in a scientific. Our job is to establish the platform upon which the scientific rationale and basis for why what we're doing would work in a clinical environment. Yeah, I mean, the top journals like Nature and Science and Cell and all those guys, they're all still into the gene world, you know, all the sexy science that they have. But the problem is we got 1,600 people a day dying from cancer, and it gets worse every year. So what does all that stuff mean? And the other problem is many of the top, you can't reproduce. Let me tell you something. They have a problem in science today that many of the papers that are published in the cancer field in the top scientific journals can't be reproduced by other people. There's a failure to reproduce, right? One thing that is reproducible is how fast somebody with a glioblastoma dies. You know, the 15-month survival, it's so unbelievably consistent across all institutions that the death from glioblastoma, you could not design a better experiment for reproducibility than how fast the standard of care kills the cancer patients. So it sounds horrible for me to say something like that. But, you know, the problem is the treatments that they're using are facilitating the recurrence of the tumor and the death of the patients. And these poor patients go into the clinics like sheep. They don't understand the biology, and the people treating them don't understand the biology. So you have this tragedy, a massive tragedy of people dying unnecessarily. You know, I'm not saying we can keep people with glioblastoma, but I think we can keep them alive a hell of a lot longer. I mean, look at Pablo Kelly. He's out 8 years now, diagnosed with a glio. He never took radiation or chemo or any of that stuff. He did take surgery, debulking surgery every couple of 3 years, and he's still going. You know, he was young. He avoided toxic therapy. He also had a therapeutic gene, which really is interesting, that actually blocks glycolysis and glutaminolysis, which is really exciting in and of itself. But anyway, he's still alive, and we have other patients, like Jethro, you said, we're getting GBM patients. We can do this for every major cancer: breast cancer, colon cancer, you know, bladder. They all have the same problem. They can't live without glucose and glutamine. So a single strategy could manage all these cancers. You know, you don't need specialists for your type of cancer. It's all crap. Yeah. I mean, the cancers are all the same. They're all very similar. They can't live without glucose and glutamine. So you don't need the prostate cancer guy, the breast cancer guy, the colon cancer. We have our specialists. Listen, it's one simple disease. All you have to know is the biology, and but that is too shocking for the field to take. They can't accept it, you know, and so we continue to persist the way we're doing. And the patients bear the brunt of all this, unfortunately.
Do you think that plants, including plants on a diet, like, because I know you work with keto mainly, right? Very low carb.
No, we work with anything. It's not just, that's a misconception. We don't know what diet would be best for any particular cancer patient. All we know is that if you can keep the glucose ketone index to 2.0 or below, if you can do that with a plant-based diet, a meat-based diet, a fish-based diet, I don't care what it is. If you can keep the GKI low, you keep the glucose low, the ketones elevated, now your tumors become vulnerable to specific drugs that will target them. Someone wants to use a calorie-restricted Mediterranean diet to do that, great. Someone wants to do a keto, great. Carnivore diet, great. I don't care. As long as you can, so it's irrelevant. As long as the diet meets nutritional standards, like you don't want to be vitamin or mineral depleted. So whatever, and all the diets that you can talk about are all nutritionally balanced. The question is how you get them to give you a GKI of 2.0 or below. So you get the little meter, Keto Mojo meter, or whatever meter you want to use, and measure your same. So can I eat this? And they say, well, you know, I can't get my GKI down. Well, don't eat that. You know, eat something that will bring your GKI down. And then, you know, stress management. People with cancer get all freaked out. They think they're going to die. And that causes corticosteroids to go up, which raises blood sugar, which makes your tumor grow faster. So, you know, chill out. Take acupuncture, massage therapy, do it, music therapy, do whatever you're going to do to relax. And then, you know, bring your diet, bring yourself into a low GK. Then you start taking drugs that will then target the glucose and the glutamine availability of these tumors.
Okay, so we talked about the diet. The single most important thing is a GKI index of 2 or less. Glucose to ketone, right? We're talking millimolar, right? Because so that we can work in the same unit, millimolar per liter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the drugs that you mentioned, because the diet is going to help us not get any sugar in. And so that's a major fuel source for cancer cells. So once we cut out the glucose, we still have to deal with the glutamine. So what do we do then?
Well, glutamine, there's a number of glutamine drugs available. We haven't tested them all out. We've only tested 6-deoxynorleucine, DON, D-O-N. That's Delta, Oscar, November. It's D-O-N. People get it all, Don, you know. They say, where can I get this drug? The problem is it's hard to get the drug. We buy it from Sigma Chemical Corporation. There are companies that will make it. It's hard to get. They always say not for human use. Why? I use it on animals. Why would it not be used for humans? So, because, you know, they don't want the lawsuit. They don't want the risk of all this stuff. So you have a good drug. It was used a long time ago on cancer patients. Leukemias in children responded fairly well, but they took it off the market. They said it was too toxic. And, well, relative to what? You know, relative to some of the things that they're given right now. The reason why it was toxic is they used it in too high of a concentration without lowering the blood sugar. We published a paper showing that you could use far less concentration of this drug went in therapeutic ketosis, and you had very little, if any, toxicity. So if you can take a formerly very powerful drug and make it non-toxic, it's like having a new drug. So, but nobody wants to use it. It's off patent. You can't make any money on it. So therefore, you can't get it. So, where is the outrage? Where is the outrage from the population? There's no outrage. Nobody seems to care. The poor cancer patients, they go through all of this stuff. The families are suffering. Everybody is suffering, and the poor guy dies. And then everybody is relieved. They're relieved because their loved one now is no longer suffering, and they're no longer suffering watching their loved one suffer. So as soon as the whole thing goes, they're all exhausted and they go about their way. Why nobody's marching on Washington? They do it for every other thing. And when 1,600 people a day dying from cancer, and it's getting worse. In China, it's over 8,000 a day dying from cancer. We think this is going away anytime soon. Yeah, 8,000, over 8,000 a day from cancer. It's surpassed heart disease as the #1 killer of Chinese people.
Why?
Yeah, well, they have a greater population, obviously, and they also have a more toxic environment than we have. But still,
Mercury.
Yeah, and a lot of other things. But every country in the world is suffering from this. Western societies, I should say, and it's getting worse, not better. And people, to prevent cancer, you just keep your mitochondria healthy. And a lot of people are doing that, but we live in a society where everything is fast foods, fast cooking, fast this, fast that, and we're putting ourselves at risk, and we're exposed to chemicals. We're exposed to a lot of things, and the cancer incidence is going up, death is going up. But it's a solvable problem if you understand how you get cancer in the first place, which we've defined clearly, and what you can do to manage it once you get the cancer, which we've defined clearly. But unfortunately, it's not part of standard practice, period.
What can somebody who is struggling right now with cancer or know somebody who has cancer do? Because they can do the diet portion, keto, that's easy, but...
Well, it's not easy. You really need to know. You need somebody to consult with, like Alicia Halakis, a young lady who's studied this. I mean, you have to take careful blood work on patients. A lot of cancer patients, they have all kinds of abnormalities in their blood work. They're out of whack. They're out of homeostasis. You got to bring these cancer patients back into homeostasis. Get your body in a stable state. Then you gradually go after the tumor. The diet is important, but it's not the only. Well, what part of the day do you take the drug when you're in the best part of the key? There's a lot of parts of doses, timing, and scheduling. And yes, and I also know that when patients take part in the management of their health, they feel more empowered. They don't feel that they're just some pawn sitting around being treated without their. When you do metabolic therapy, you are part of the solution. So it's your motivation and commitment to manage your health, and you start reading and understanding what you're doing and why you're doing. And then you begin to question, how is that drug going to work together with this nutritional program that I have to manage my cancer? And a lot of physicians can't answer those questions. So, and rightly so, we're still on the cutting edge of this. So don't forget, we don't have a signed, sealed package by which we can implement immediately into clinics all over the world. But we have the outline, we have the framework, we know what we need to do. We just have to have people that are trained, that know how to do this, and the patient's understanding of what they're getting, how they go through this. And then you're going to see the cancer death rates start to drop off, and people are going to emerge healthier than before. So
if somebody absolutely listens to you and absolutely is convinced with the metabolic theory of cancer, how can they get their hands on Don, which is the drug that you work with?
Yeah, it's hard because they won't sell it to people. There's a situation there. Now, there are drugs that are being produced right now that are these analogs of Don and analogs of other kinds of drugs. They're taking the core structure of the drug and just modifying it slightly so you can call it a new patent, make a lot of money But you know, the problem is, okay, I'm not opposed to that. I think those drugs are going to be wonderful. But why should we sacrifice all these people when we have drugs that are already available? We can still go and modify these drugs, but why not allow the cancer patients right now to be treated with diet drug combinations? And again, it comes back to revenue generation. Again, it comes back to the unfamiliarity of what I just told you. Again, it comes back to the fact that everybody thinks cancer is a genetic disease, and therefore we hear about this mutation and that mutation. Most of this is irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. And yet people are all thinking, oh, you know, my cancer has this kind of a mutation. No, it's irrelevant. Your cancer needs glucose and glutamine. Without that, it can't grow. That mutation is absolutely irrelevant for the most part. So, and we're going to target that mutation to, well, you know, some guy might do well in it, but a lot of other people aren't doing well. I can't tell you, I get hundreds of emails from cancer patients who failed all these immunotherapies and all these so-called precision things. I mean, you know, all I know is that cancer can't live without glucose and glutamine, and they can't burn ketones for energy. So it's because it's very simple. You lower glucose and glutamine, elevate the ketones, and these tumors now become compromised and they start dying. And you got to do it slowly. You don't go in and try to hit them as hard as you can, like radiation and chemo. And then they say, oh, your cancer is now resistant. Well, you didn't do it the right way, man. You don't know the biology. If you knew the biology, you'd never be doing this kind of a crazy stuff.
Right.
You know? So it's frustrating to me because I feel that so many oncologists simply don't understand or know about the biology of the very disease they're working with. And it's not their fault. It's the fault of the system and the way they train these folks to deal with this disease.
Yeah.
So you put the firewalls one after another.
Yeah.
And it's very clear why metabolic therapy is not going to be the standard of care anytime soon.
No, medical schools are they're teaching their medical students how to prescribe drugs, basically. And then even after they graduate, they don't have time to continue doing the research that you and I are doing. They are waiting and they're getting their information and their continuing education credits from basically the pharmaceutical companies that are sponsoring all of these conferences, that are placing every other, if you flip a page of the JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, flip every other page, there's a whole spread of ads. And then on the other page, they're bashing anything that does not adhere to their drug treatment model. So we are toast because it really has to come from us. You know?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because they say, well, we can't use anything unless it's been proven in a clinical trial. But who says? You know, who are you to tell that? You can't do a clinical trial in drug diet combinations the way a double-blind crossover. I mean, you don't think this guy's eating avocados, the other guy's eating, you know, milkshakes. I mean, it's very hard to do. So you can do it by comparing historical controls. If I do this metabolic therapy, will my overall survival and quality of life be better than what we've seen on thousands of other papers that have already been published? Do historical control. Oh, we can't do that. It's not part of the practice. Says who? I mean, if your ass is on the line, what do you care about what they think, right? I mean, who are these guys to tell you, oh, no, we can't do that because it's not part of the practice. The practice right now is not working. Get over it. The practice, whatever they're doing right now is not working. Over 1,600 cancer patients are dying every day. Okay, from this, and they're either dying from the disease or the treatment that's killing them. You know, you go in there, you look pretty healthy, and in 2 weeks you're dead. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
I mean, there's no concern, there's no outrage. You know, people are just sitting around. I don't know what they're doing.
That's what I don't get either. Yeah, for me, it's just mind blowing. That's why you know, I
keep telling people, write articles to say that we're wrong. Now, what they do is they write articles and they say, oh, cancer cells take in oxygen better than normal cells. Therefore, Otto Warburg must be wrong. They don't understand that the oxygen in a cancer cell is made for reactive oxygen species, which cause the mutations. They don't know. This is the details of understanding the biology and biochemistry of the problem. If you understand those details, then these kinds of statements make no sense. And our experiments are designed to rule out those kinds of challenges.
In an easy to understand way, if you can, what really causes those genetic mutations and why that's wrong?
Yeah, well, what causes the genetic mutations are reactive oxygen species, ROS. ROS are known in the field to be carcinogenic and mutagenic. All right, mutagenic means they cause mutations. Where do the ROS come from in the cell? Comes from the damaged oxidative phosphorylation. So when the oxidative, that's what Warburg said, all cancers initiate with a damaged OXPHOS. So the oxidative phosphorylation damage creates mutations indirectly from the mitochondria. Now, as the cell starts suffocating, it upregulates fermentation metabolism, which is then driven by glucose and glutamine. So glucose and glutamine are replacing the energy through oxidative phosphorylation in these fermentation. So the cell gradually collects mutations, and every cell in the tumor, anybody's tumor, has a different constellation of mutations than any other cell in the tumor. No two tumor cells can have the same constant, they're all different. So when you say, oh, my tumor, has a EGF receptor mutation, some of your cells do, but not all of your cells do. Okay, and those mutations are downstream effects anyway. They're effects of the growing tumor. They're not the cause of the growing tumor. So trying to target effects is not going to get you to home plate, right? You got to go after what's keeping the cells growing, and that's fermentation, which means energy without oxygen. Cancer cells can live without oxygen, grow fine. Cancer cells can live in cyanide. Okay, you know what cyanide, that terrible poison, right?
Yeah, they're found in almonds.
Yeah, they're found in almonds. That's true. And they can be, but it's very, very low dosages. It's arsenic too. They're found in the pits. But cyanide blocks oxidative phosphorylation and will kill you and me very quickly. But cancer cells don't. Cyanide has, why? Because they have, their OXPHOS is defective. They get energy from fermentation, not oxygen. Okay. So, but the cancer cells do take up oxygen, but the oxygen is converted into reactive oxygen species, which cause the mutations. So the mutations are all downstream effects of the damage to OXPHOS, and the cells are fermenting. So in order to stop the dysregulated growth, which is the definition of cancer, but what is cancer? Cancer is cell division out of control, period. Dysregulated cell growth. What's making them dysregulated? The mutations? No, the mutations are downstream epiphenomena. Okay, what's making them grow out of control? Fermentation. Why are they fermenting? Because they can't respire. Why can't they respire? Because they're mitochondrial damage. How did you get the mitochondrial damage? Well, you could have been exposed to a chemical carcinogen. You could have been exposed to an oncogenic virus. You could have been intermittent hypoxia. You could have inherited a rare gene that only causes cancer if, in fact, it damages oxidative phosphorylation. So, like the BRCA1, you hear Angelina Jolie made it famous by having her breasts and ovaries removed. That has a 50 or 60% penetrance, means 50 to 60% of the women that have the mutation will put themselves at risk for getting breast cancer or some other kind of cancer. But 40% have the same mutation, never get the cancer. What's going on? Why 40% of the women have BRCA1 never develop a tumor? Because that mutation in that person, for unknown reason, never damaged their respiration. In order to get cancer, you have to damage the respiration, whether it's from a rare inherited mutation, whether it's from a chemical carcinogen, intermittent hypoxia, systemic inflammation, carcinogens, age, you get older, that damages mitochondria. More people get cancer when they're older than younger. Everything is explainable. As soon as you understand the biology of the cancer, you can understand how you got it, what you should do to treat it.
Right.
It's not a mystery, not a mystery. So it's only a mystery to people that don't understand the biology.
Yeah. And for our audience also, the mitochondria is a form of ancient bacteria, right? Before it got incorporated into our cells. And so when you take antibiotics, there is a line of reasoning because you're taking the antibiotic to kill bacteria. Well, the mitochondria shares a lot of similarities with that. So you can have a lot of damage inflicted upon your mitochondria as well.
And you have to, that's very important. And you have to also realize that even before that symbiotic interaction between the oxygen consuming bacteria, the oxygen producing bacteria, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. 2.5 billion years ago, everything that existed on the planet was fermenting. There was no oxygen. Okay, so that relationship between the bacteria and the cell and all this kind of stuff. Now, what happens to the cancer cell is they fall back on these ancient biochemical pathways that existed before oxygen even came into the atmosphere. So that's why these cancer cells grow in cyanide, they grow in bacteria, they grow in without oxygen. I mean, the planet was hostile before oxygen came, and it still is hostile, but biochemically, organisms existed in that period of time, and they were unbridled in their proliferation. There was no control. The mitochondria evolved to control and regulate cell growth. So if the mitochondria, that organelle in our cells that gives us energy through oxygen, if that goes out, control of the cell growth goes out. So it goes back to the ancient proliferation. None of this is complicated if people understand evolutionary biology. It's so simple. It's so clear. The problem is getting the word. I don't know what to do, you know? I mean, what do you want to do? Write this in crayon? I mean, I don't know what to do. I mean, it's just like.
Just go on every single podcast in the nation.
Well, you know, you could do that, but if nothing happens, you know, it's just hard to say. I don't know. You know, at least if I got cancer, I know what I would do. So that's all I can say. Oh yeah, I know what to do. And I would seek out my friends that also know what to do. Yeah. And I would manage the disease with the knowledge that I have. And people always say, oh yeah, what are you going to do? Yeah, well, first thing I'm going to do is stop eating. That's for sure. You know, go on water only fasting, get my blood work as pristine as it could be. Then I would take bendazole, the parasite medication. Oh yeah, there's a lot of things, cocktail. We're working on all these diet drug cocktails.
Okay. So, I've only known about Don.
No, bendazole works really well.
Okay.
These are parasite medications. Some of the parasites in cancer cells use the same energy type. So parasite medications. Yeah, check Simon Yu in St. Louis, Missouri. He treats cancer patients with parasite medications.
Okay.
So a lot of this is non-toxic, especially if you're in nutritional ketosis. That's the key. You got to get into nutritional ketosis first, then you use all these different drugs that pound away at these tumor cells in a very strategic way, not being too aggressive. The press pulse concept that we published outlines the strategy that you use to manage cancer. It's going to be really, really exciting to see how we can easily manage cancer once the knowledge becomes more widely available to the medical establishment. And then people will throw their hands up and, why haven't we been doing this? Well, because there was a lot of resistance in a lot of different ways to doing it.
Yes. And because you've been getting your continuing education credits from the likes of Pfizer, Merck, and all of the other pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear, but there's so many firewalls to prevent people from doing this. Their knowledge themselves, the knowledge of their attending physicians, the educational system in the medical schools that gets almost very little, if any, treatment on diet, nutrition, or how drugs and diets can work together to make people healthy. You know, the food industry produces massive amounts of poorly nutritious foods, makes you sick, puts you at risk for diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. And then the pharmaceutical companies come in and give you the drugs that are going to help you. So it's a beautiful cycle.
Oh, and you forgot the insurance companies.
Yeah, it's a
the
great.
Insurance companies are benefiting from all of this as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's all the same. The problem is a lot of people make a lot of money, helps the nation out doing this. We don't want to disrupt that for any reason. No, it protects us in a lot of different ways. But how is it that we can start to figure out how to generate revenue? How can we make metabolic therapy lucrative?
When there is demand for it, right?
I think there's going to be demand for it, but then there's got to be the entrepreneurs who really have to sit down and say, how can we make a business model out of this? And I'm not opposed to that at all. I mean, I'm not really interested in whether I make a lot of money or not. I'm more interested to know that this therapy can actually help a lot of people, and then let someone else, if they want to, exploit it for those kinds of purposes.
Right.
But the bottom line is, does it work? Can it help people live longer with a higher quality of life? And the answer is yes, it can, if done correctly by knowledgeable people. And that's the bottom. So we know what we need to do. We know how to do it. The only problem is people can't figure out how to make a profit on it. And once that happens, I think this will explode. Because but the hospitals need to make revenue. I mean, everybody needs to make something. but it's, so you see how it's tied up in this. So anyway, it's going to be a challenge, but I think eventually the firewalls will slowly come down.
Yeah.
And more and more people are going to want this. They're going to want it.
Of course, it's the life
want to
of
stay
death or
healthy.
death.
They
Yeah.
want to feel good. They want to stay healthy.
Yeah, and I think as more and more people understand that keto is also a natural state, babies are born in a state of ketosis. Breast milk is designed to keep that newborn in that state of fat burning or ketosis. So more and more people are understanding that that's a better diet, and are seeing all of the holes in the recommendations given out by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who is shamelessly in bed with the food companies. I mean, they are one and the same.
Yeah, you see, you have that's what I'm saying. You have so many conflicting interests on this. And, you're right. And you see, after you pile them all up, you can see why this is not working.
Yeah.
But it's, in cancer, your life, your soul, your existence on the planet is threatened. I mean, this is not some insignificant kind of discussion. I mean, people's lives here are at risk, and you don't want. And people fear the treatments more than they fear the disease, or as much as they fear the disease. I mean, they get all, they get surgically mutilated. Their hair falls out. They're really sick. They get it's just terrible. So
Yeah.
and they feel that's the only way. No, that's not the only way. There's a new way, and this new way will manage that disease better than what we have. And you won't have to lose your beautiful hair, and you won't have to look all wrinkled and shriveled and horrible. There's ways we can deal with this, and it's just knowledge just has to be given. I need to publish more papers, and our work is supported not by the National Institutes of Health, but by private foundations. And the goodwill of certain people. Believe me, there are some people with means that say, you guys are right. And I want to be part of the revolution that's going to happen. As a matter of fact, there's a new movie coming out. It's a documentary, The Cancer Revolution, based on our stuff. So it's coming out in the fall, I believe.
Awesome.
So it's going to shake the foundation of the entire cancer industry.
I'll make sure to link all these things if I can find a website, if it's already been done for that.
Yeah, and if people, we have Travis Christofferson's Foundation for Cancer Metabolic Therapies. People donate money there, and we have a standing grant with Boston College and his foundation. So, and then some people want to set up their own foundations and support the work.
Yeah.
So, and we publish, and the progress, the public scientific papers that we publish put in the acknowledgements the names and foundations of everybody who supports us.
Wonderful.
So you want to see what you're doing, you wave our paper and you say, see, I supported this. And people like it because they go around to their family members and say, look at this nice paper. Our foundation supported this work. So,
I will make sure to link all these things. Do you have to go exactly at 3:30 or can I?
No, you can ask me a few more questions.
How about 10 minutes max?
Yeah, 10 minutes would be good.
Wonderful. Okay. Because something that I heard you talk about is a malignancy test when they go in to see and test whether a growth is malignant or not. You were talking about how that can actually be harmful in some cases. Yes.
I mean, it's not like I said this. There's dozens and dozens of papers in the scientific literature showing that the disturbance of the microenvironment of the tumor by needle biopsy, even surgery, can spread the cancer cells throughout the body. We define what the metastatic cancer cell is. It's a type of macrophage, which already has the natural capability of spreading through the body. So my hope is that people can make cancer diagnosis without sticking a tumor. There's developments now they call liquid biopsies. It's still kind of in its infancy, but they can take a blood test and see whether or not you have cancer in your body. And they can sometimes even say where that might be. But at least you don't have to be poking a tumor to send to the pathologist to tell you, you have stage 2, whatever. Or 3 or whatever. If it's a stage 4, then you've already provoked that thing to spread out. We published a big paper on breast cancer showing how many breast tumors can be spread by biopsies of these tumors. But it's not just breast, it's liver cancer, colon cancer, all the major cancers. It's called inflammatory oncotaxis. You inflame an onco situation, boom, and you run the risk. I'm not saying it happens all the time. People say, oh, it happens very rarely. Yeah, but if you're the one that's the rare one, then your life is at risk now. I don't care how rare it is. You put somebody's life at risk by poking something. And now if you can get a diagnosis without doing that, that's better, you know? So a lot of things we do, we should never be doing. I mean, that makes no sense. For what? And then they take a gene expression profile of the piece of tissue that they just poked. And now the expression now what you have left in your body could be now totally different from the piece of tissue they took out. What, just to tell you have an ERK mutation? It's irrelevant anyway because it's a downstream epiphenomenon.
Right, and the treatment is going to be the same regardless.
Yeah, so I mean, similar. I mean, most of the time it doesn't mean anything. So it's just another way to make revenue generation for stuff that's irrelevant. I hate to say things like that, but it's true.
Wow. So do you see patients or is it just
I'm not a physician. No, I don't see any patients. I can't treat anybody. I don't make recommendations of what they should do.
Coaching, consulting?
I have a packet of information that I send to cancer patients, but it's all educational. And sometimes there's names in there that they can reach out to physicians that actually could be understanding the situation. So, you know, I don't treat anybody. I can't treat anybody. I work with preclinical model systems in the lab. And we test all that. We troubleshoot all these therapies on these preclinical systems. And then I can tell physicians what they might consider doing, but not, they will translate the information to the patients, but I could never tell any patient what they should or should not do.
And you're doing this at Boston College?
Well, we do the basic research at BC. Yeah, we do all of our basic research here. And then from there, the links, the information that we get, we publish it in papers, and then clinical labs can start doing. That's why Jethro and these guys are doing these clinical trials to test our concepts. But if you got to do it right, and if you don't do it right, just because if you look in the literature, say, oh, ketogenic diets, they work, they don't work, they don't know this, oh, it makes it worse, it does. You didn't do it right. If you do it right, it'll work. You know, you got. It's like anything, you know, if you do it the wrong way, it's not going to work. You know, you can't, oh, the patient won't tolerate it. Well, what kind of a diet are you giving the patient? All these little kids with epilepsy seem to tolerate it pretty well. What the hell are you doing with this poor adult guy? You're making him so miserable. It's just, you know, it's not so horrific once you understand what you need to do, you know, so it's just one of those kinds of things.
How can people minimize their risk of ever getting cancer?
Well, keep your mitochondria healthy. All right, it's just that simple. It's the origin of cancer is mitochondrial damage. Well, how do I prevent mitochondrial damage? Well, exercise for sure. There's no question. Exercise will everybody knows that. Eat, what do they call it? Diet and exercise. It's always this cliche, diet and exercise. Okay, well, measure your GKI period. So, go on a water-only fasting or zero-carb diet. See if you can get your sugar down and your ketones up. In fact, a lot of people without cancer are doing this now. All these young kids, they're all jumping around and seeing what level of ketosis you can get into and all this kind of stuff. What's your GKI? What's your GKI? Oh yeah, I got below 1. Ooh, that's really good, you know. Well, that all helps you from getting cancer. You know, think of the people who are getting cancer. They have a lot of comorbidities, obesity, inflammation, toxic chemicals in their environment, smoking, doing all kinds of stuff. And all that can damage your mitochondria. No exercise. We're commuting in these cars. We're sitting in front of computers. We're just not allowing our body to heal itself the way it should be healed.
Are you passionate about the groundbreaking and heroic research of Dr. Thomas Seyfried on metabolic therapy and cancer? So are we. That's why we've created something special for you, in collaboration with Johnny Rockermeyer, a German book publisher and translator. Introducing our collection of meticulously crafted books that distill the essence of Dr. Seyfried's work. Dive into the science and discoveries. These summary books are your gateway to understanding the intricate world of metabolic ketogenic therapy in a clear, concise, and engaging way. Whether you're new to the subject or a seasoned enthusiast, our books offer insights that can change your life. Ready to explore this transformative knowledge? Visit our website at www.cancerasametabolicdisease.com to get your copy. You can buy the ebook there directly and the paperbook via the provided links. Here's the best part. A portion of every purchase goes directly to support Dr. Thomas Seyfried's groundbreaking research. That's why the direct ebook purchase is the best option to donate as much as possible. You can see all of the donations Mr. Rockermeyer has already made at www.ketoforcancer.net. That's right, when you buy our books, you're not just investing in your own knowledge, you're also contributing to the future of cancer research. Help us make a difference. Together, we can drive change and save lives.
So the society itself, the food, the society, it's the price we pay for being in a what we call a Western civilized society, right?
Yeah.
Our primitive ancestors didn't get cancer. It was very rare. Eskimos, all these kinds of people, the native Aboriginal kinds of people. Cancer was very rare in these, and it's also rare in animals in the wild.
Right. And you give them their diet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the chimpanzee is our closest biological relative. No documented case of breast cancer in a female chimpanzee ever. Right? What the hell? They're 98% similar to us in gene and protein sequence. They're not stressed out all the time. So what's going on? Their diet and lifestyle prevents them from getting cancer. Okay, so how do we test the hypothesis? You have to take a number of these chimps and give them our diet and lifestyle. Okay, well, they don't do much exercise anyway, but they're not eating jelly-filled donuts. They're not,
right.
They're not eating and drinking heavy like most, like right?
Fried Oreos.
I asked the veterinarian down at the Franklin Park Zoo. They have a beautiful gorilla exhibit. I says, you feed these guys? Oh yeah, we feed them exactly what they eat in the jungles and all this kind of stuff. I said, why don't you go down and give them a big Domino's pizza? And the usual was animal cruelty. You can't give the gorilla pizza. You don't think the gorilla would like the pizza? He'd probably die and went to heaven. Well, the other guys would be bullshit about this guy eating the pizza. Why should I eat this beef when I have a double cheese pizza?
That's too funny. But yet we give pizzas to our children. And
whoa, we love it. Who doesn't like a big pizza?
Right. And that's balance. If you tell them to eat only meat, for example, that's extreme, you need balance in your diet.
The example of that is domestic dogs. I mean, cancer is the #1 killer of domestic dogs. They're eating the same crap we're eating, right? So, all full of grains, all full of sugar, all kinds of stuff. And the dogs are all full of cancer. But the wolf in the wild rarely, if ever, gets cancer.
Exactly.
It just comes back. It's very clear. It's diet and lifestyle, damage to mitochondria, you get cancer.
Exactly. Did we forget any major message?
I don't know. I mean, everybody has a different question under a different condition. We can answer most, but not all. Some things I just don't know because we haven't tested it. We haven't done the experiments ourselves. When we do the experiments, the reason I do this because I've done a lot of these experiments in the lab, and we test a lot of things. We know what provokes cancer. If you want your tumor to grow fast, you got to make sure you can get your blood sugar as high as it possibly can. Go down and chug some Cairo syrup. See how fast your tumor can grow. So, but who's going to do that, right? We do it. We give the cancer patients high-dose steroids, makes the blood sugar go up, right? So, I mean, everything is nuts. And then they'll say, I didn't know sugar drives cancer. What? How could you not know that?
Wow.
That should be Health 101. Sugar drives cancer. Remember that. Keep your blood sugar down.
Yes. No. Being in this field and knowing what we know, you live in awe and you're just literally mind blown every day when you look at everybody else not realizing what's right in front of us.
Yeah. And it's amazing that some people can do this their whole life.
Yeah.
Eat and drink and smoke anything, and they live to be 95. Right? You see these people.
Yeah. Maybe not with the best quality of life, though.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they always seem to have a smile on their face.
Sometimes, yeah. I don't know. I think it's also how you define health, because there's so many different ways of defining it. Just because you're not dying flat out doesn't mean you're healthy.
No, that's true. That's true.
How can people find you, Dr. Seyfried, and how can people support your work?
Well, I mean, some people like to set up their own foundation if they have money. They say, I don't want to go through Travis Christofferson. I want my family foundation. and the university sets it up with a very minimal overhead, like 5% or something like this. Or if they feel they don't want the hassle, they donate to Travis Christofferson and just say that they want the money to go to me, and most of it does anyway. So so we get a lot of money from these private foundations. We have a grant from the Childhood Cancer Foundation of England, UK, United Kingdom, for pediatric cancer. We're getting some really good results on brain tumors, pediatric brain tumors. We're going to have some really important work coming out on that. We're going to start moving. We want to start moving into breast cancer and lung cancer and melanoma, all the major ones, because we think we can manage them all. But we have to have documented evidence that you can do this. And the more money we get, the more we can do these kinds of experiments. And eventually, we'll have the whole list of cancers. In other words, can anyone find a cancer that can survive without glucose and glutamine under ketosis? That's what I want to know. That's what I'm looking for, that kind of cancer. So far, we haven't found one. So, so it tells you what you need to do. Very clear. Very clear.
Dr. Seyfried, may I dare ask you how old you are?
I'm 75.
75.
So I have to clean this cancer stuff up in the next several years, because I'm not going to be around forever, and we're working on all cylinders here. So I'm not going to be. We got to clean the mess up real quick.
Right.
I don't want, and we can.
Do you have lofty goals? Like you have a lot of people in the health field who, including myself, who want to live very, very long, 120 at least, if not longer.
Well, I don't know if you don't want to live that long, because all your friends are dead, and then your kids are dead.
You make new friends.
Yeah, well, yeah, and most of those will be demented. So you got to be careful, right? In fact, if you're demented, you meet new friends every day.
Oh my God! All right, okay. I'll work on that. Maybe we'll talk about it in the future.
Yeah. Think about that.
Yeah. Dr. Seyfried, again, it was such an honor. I am so glad we had this conversation. Hopefully soon, maybe I will send you another email and we'll set up another interview, because I still have so many questions, and I know the comments we're going to have even more questions. So maybe we can answer as well. Right. Do you want to leave our audience with any last message?
No, I just think that they need to keep their minds open, that new therapies and procedures will be coming. Yeah. I just don't know when, and they know the obstacles, and if they can do anything to remove some of those obstacles so that this new approach to managing cancer can become more widespread, then they're participating in the eventual transformation, which will happen.
Yes, revolution in cancer.
It's absolutely going to be a revolution. It's just that the word has to get out, and it's going to be a groundswell of interest, because people would prefer to do metabolic therapy if they could get someone that understands it. So let's train. And believe me, young people are jumping on this. The young people, they understand it. They're going to come after, and they're going to change the system. So we're just outlining what they need to do.